when people ask or inquire about this question, it's usually because they're asking the question at a premature stage of their path. So I get it, and I totally understand why, and I can understand why it would help you on that path. But we have to see that when we're asking this question, when this question is a problem, it's coming out of a suffering state of mind, and the problem cannot actually be seen or solved in that problem state of mind, in that suffering state of mind. So I am going to explain with a sufficient answer for you, but the first thing to understand is that the most important thing for you is to realize you're asking the wrong question and you're going in the wrong direction. The better way to understand this is to understand and experience what you are to a degree where this question is, the answer is obvious, just like it is for me and anybody else who's understood this in this way. But now I'm going to explain to you how this kind of makes sense. At least I'm going to try my best. So most people wonder, why does God make suffering happen? Or why does love, if I'm love and intelligence and I'm just pure consciousness, how does pure consciousness create suffering? And why do people suffer? Why are there wars and things like that? The answer is actually very simple. So you need to realize that God is not just this experience. God is every possible experience that could ever possibly be experienced, because it is existence. It is God. So if there is existence, there has to be everything. You see, existence can't just be some things. Existence can't just be, I'll be all the universes without the mosquitoes, and I'll create a load of universes with all the beautiful butterflies, and I won't create any universes where there's any possibility for someone to be offended, or any possibility for someone, or maybe being offended is okay, but maybe I don't want anyone to be murdered. You can't just choose out of a select number of options as existence. Existence is absolute, meaning it is all possibilities, all in potentiality. Therefore, all potentiality has to be. So if there is going to be anything, there has to be everything. You can't just have some things, right? So as the source of existence, existence is everything. Therefore, there is the experience of everything. And where we happen to be is in the part of the experience of everything where there's the possibility to not know what we are. And in the ignorance of not knowing what we are, we experience what God would do if it didn't know it was God. Basically, we experience what almost complete and utter darkness is. So we experience what it is like to be God, to not know we're God, and to have complete free reign over actually making decisions. That is an expression of freedom. But we can only make that possibility of having this ability to seem like we can make decisions and have free will and choose, do I want to do good things and do I want to do bad things? The only way we can get to that autonomy is to not know we are literally absolutely everything. And in the process of not knowing we are literally absolutely everything, we don't know what we are at all. And we're basically left to our own devices in essence. We're left to understand how to make good decisions, what is right, and why the universe is absolutely perfect. The only way to understand that is to go through imperfection. And therefore, in that ignorance, every mind that is attempting to know itself will do whatever it takes to know itself. So just process this for a minute. You imagine that let's just like say this poetically. Imagine you're God and you've left the kingdom of heaven. You will do whatever and then you forget that you were God, but you just have this trace within you of wanting to go back there. You would do whatever it takes to get back there, especially when you know no better, when you're in ignorance. And you could say, well, how can consciousness go into ignorance? Well, think about it like this. Imagine all there is the absolute state, which means that there's no memory because there's no objects, and no objects, you can't remember something that isn't an object. So you can't refer to the past. So imagine you're like Adam and Eve, you're in the Garden of Eden, you know nothing other than perfection. Then you leave the Garden of Eden. All of a sudden you're like, what just happened? I have no memory because there was the Garden of Eden. Everything was perfect. There was nothing to remember, no objects there. So what do we do now? We're naked. You're left to your own devices, so to speak. So from that point of view, you can't remember going, oh, but I was just God a minute ago, because there was something there you would have no reference point. So how can you go from being God to having an experience to then being God again without somehow a miracle happening? And that's basically what we call an awakening. It's basically a miracle. So we somehow remember what we are eventually, but you don't just instantly have that because there's no reference point to refer to, you see? So in ignorance, it is akin to darkness. It is akin to a type of darkness. And if you were walking around like a bull in a china shop in the pitch black, you're gonna knock a couple of things off the shelves. That's what we're experiencing. We think that everyone is malicious and these wars are so bad and everyone is suffering and things. We're imposing our own suffering onto the world. There's people you think are suffering that aren't actually suffering like you think they are. And you're actually having this pity. And this is a complete lack of compassion when we think the world is suffering more than it is. And what happens is we add our own suffering to the mix. So I want to introduce a new point of view. This is what true compassion is. Now, your suffering, we need to see this. Your suffering is not actually there. And now, don't take this out of context. Obviously, I respect and understand that you've suffered just like I have suffered in the past, right? But I don't see my suffering in the same way anymore. And I'm going to try and help you, guide you to the place where you can see it in the same way. Your suffering, while it was there, was real to you. And that has to be respected. But on an ultimate level, the suffering isn't actually there. Now, let me explain why. If you've heard of the Indian analogy of the rope and the snake, so you're walking down, it's twilight, you can hardly see what's on the road, but you can see faint figures, and all of a sudden you see a snake-like figure. You think, oh my God, it's a snake. Instantaneously you react, you don't want to walk there because you think the snake is there. You get scared. All of a sudden, you look directly, you go closer to the figure, you look closely and you look at it directly, and now you see it's just a rope. In the moment where there was fear, yes, that was real, but what was it fearing? Was it fearing a snake or was it fearing a rope? If it was fearing a rope, then the thing that was causing the suffering wasn't actually there. But your idea that it was a snake made it real, therefore you did suffer, but you didn't actually suffer something that was actually there. So we have to see that suffering is illusory in the same way that we fear the rope, which we think was a snake. It's not actually a snake. Now, in the same way, suffering is a resistance to an experience. So just like we think, oh, there's a snake, I resist the snake. I am suffering, I am scared. The thing I'm suffering from is over there and I'm resisting it. The thing we're suffering from is not where the suffering comes from. It doesn't come from the snake or the rope. It comes from our resistance to it. So every time that we suffer, there's the thing we think we're suffering from, and then there's our resistance to the thing we think we're suffering from. The thing we think we're suffering from is never the issue. It's not the feeling, it's not the anxiety, it's not the fear, it's the resistance to it. So that resistance is what the suffering is. That's the uncomfortable part. That's the thing you think you want to get rid of. But you can't get rid of resistance because resistance is by nature resisting. So if you resist resistance, you just add more resistance. So you cannot remove resistance. Therefore, in the same way, you cannot remove suffering. So if you cannot remove suffering, what happens? Well, you realize the thing that you were suffering from isn't actually there. So you don't even need to remove suffering. You don't need to remove it. It doesn't need to go because there's nothing there to suffer from. Then you realize there's no more resistance left to the things you think you're suffering from. And when there's no resistance left, guess what happens? There's no more suffering because the suffering was the resistance. So we come to realize the only way to actually end suffering is to stop wanting to end it. And the minute we stop wanting to end it, there's no more suffering. So if we want to relieve the world of suffering, we have to start not by worrying about what everybody else is suffering from. We think this is a noble act, but it's not. It perpetuates suffering. The best way to kill everyone on a plane is to try and solve everybody else's problems first. Put your own life jacket on, sort your own friggin' oxygen tank, then you're probably going to be able to help more people than let me try and save everyone. You see? It's a form of ignorance. So let's evolve from that. Step one, you've listened to an air conductor talk about the thing. Very simple knowledge. Start with yourself. Help yourself first before you stop worrying about what everybody else is worrying about. Then you're going to realize, I don't need to remove my suffering. Oh my gosh, actually, my suffering actually revealed the truth to me. And the truth was, the thing I thought I was suffering from isn't actually there, even though I thought it was. And at the time it was real, and I respect that, I have compassion for it. But on an ultimate level, now I see it wasn't. And the actual suffering was the fact I was resisting it. So my suffering ended the minute I stopped resisting my experience. Interesting. So technically what that means then is that if I'm resisting the suffering of other people, I'm creating more of my own suffering, and then I'm adding to the suffering. So the more I resist other people's suffering, if I pity them, if I feel shamed for them, I'm actually feeling that for myself. And if I feel it for myself, I add more suffering, and therefore I cannot help anybody else. You can't help somebody else if you're suffering. People think it's a noble thing. Oh, I feel so much empathy for you. We all suffer together. Let's all suffer in a suffering circle. No. What are you trying to do with that? That doesn't do anything. True, if we're going to help someone with suffering, you need to not be suffering yourself. So suffering because of someone else's suffering is not doing anything. You see, we need to wake up to this. So understand very clearly that your suffering and other people's suffering should be respected. We should understand. For them, it is real, and that is as good as we need to know. However, to help ease other people's suffering, we have to have a higher level understanding, which is what we've just gone through with you, and know that it's not really there, and have compassion. And the true compassion is when you realize and you have recognized and understood your own suffering, and you can do that now for other people. You know, this is the definition of compassion: to withstand another's suffering without any need to change it, and to fully love and accept their current experience just like you do your own. So instead of going, oh, but look, and I learned this when my sister just had cancer. I was watching her in pain, suffering, telling me that she didn't want to leave, didn't want to die, didn't want to go through the process, talking to me about how, how's it going to happen? Am I just going to choke one day and die? And, things like that. She was scared. Towards the end of her life, the very end, she wasn't scared, so I'm infinitely grateful. But she was scared. And at the time I was realizing, I don't want this to happen for her. This isn't interesting. I noticed, wow, this is my mechanism of, I lack compassion here, because I'm basically resisting her suffering. I'm resisting it. I don't want her to suffer. But in this moment, the biggest blessing I can give her is to not add my suffering to hers, and to be there, and to be able to honor and respect the pain and the suffering that she's going through without adding to it. You see? This is why it's so important. And if we can do this for people, could you imagine the difference the world would be? The difference in the world doesn't come from moaning about it, crying about it. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? It comes from actually understanding ourselves on the deepest level possible, and then understanding other people on the deepest level possible. That's what's going to bring change. I have a free community. The link's in the description. I'd love to see you there, where I host meditations, guidance on this. So yeah, if you'd like to join, I'd love to have you. Have an amazing day, guys. Take care.